And it's possible that Stand for Children may withdraw their initiative if they think that what's happening, what's coming out of the department is consistent with what they'd like to see. But they're also prepared to go forward with it. If they do, I would hope people would have serious reservations about it, because I believe that it undercuts the collaborative initiative that we're seeing our department and the teachers and our school communities put together. So that's a summary of my assessment of this initiative.
Can you repeat what the initiative actually says?
Sure. Okay, well, the main point is that it would create what they call a model system of education, educator evaluation standards, and it would be based on some of the same points that were discussed here. It would take away from the collective bargaining process this design, and so you'd have this model education standard that would rely to some extent on, or perhaps to a large extent, on the results of standardized test scores, classroom performance of the observations. In some ways, it's not profoundly different from what the department has been putting together. But it does not allow for, and I think the key point is that it takes the formulation and the specifics of the evaluation process out of any kind of local discussion. So you create a law that lays out the standards, and then that applies across the state. And seniority would be taken out of the analysis of hiring. And in cases where that there are personnel layoffs, you would not rely on seniority to maintain staff, as is current practice. I think that's a key consideration that they would like to do later.
Well, does it also remove the unions from the conversation, or does it include the...
Yeah, well, it does. It absolutely does. I think that's probably a critical factor. And as I say, it takes that out of the collaborative and bargaining process at the local level. Yeah.
It might be able to sort of clarify that piece of it. It's what it says is if the union and management cannot reach agreement on what the evaluation system will look like in that district, then the district has to adopt the model that the department is developing.
So it gives people
it shortens the collective bargaining and says if the agreement can't be reached, then the district has to adopt the model system. And then it further focuses on the issue of seniority and says that seniority cannot be, then no collective bargaining can have provisions that gave seniority a role in teacher assignment, layoff, et cetera, et cetera. Those are two big issues.
Yeah. Paul, what's the problem with... I understand you're going to have a problem with seniority, but what's your problem with the first part of that?
Well, what Carla was saying is if people can't agree at the collective bargaining level, then it gets imposed. So in some ways, what's the point of even bringing it to the table? You're going to deal with it, you're going to have it imposed on you. I think that what we've heard earlier this morning is far superior to that. It's a system that's intended to be designed collaboratively and implemented at the local level and tailored to the needs of the local community. Yeah, I think that's a much superior way to go. And I'd be very leery about a proposal that comes from an outside group that doesn't demonstrate any particular expertise in education or educator evaluation, and then seeks to impose it across the state.
How are you going to actually educate the public on this, the pros and the cons on this? How are you going to get that out to them? How are you going to disseminate that?
Yeah, well, a discussion like this morning is an excellent start. But I think it's a really serious, it's a really big question, and it's a very serious problem. Because you're going to have, if this goes forward, a very well-financed campaign that's operating up here at the television level, at the radio level, at the soundbite level, on an issue that's very complicated, that has local implications, that has a great significance to teachers, to the education profession, to students, that is filled with complexity and nuance. And it seems really inappropriate to try to do it on a state ballot initiative. But how you're going to play that out in a political setting is a very challenging question. And I have real concerns about the dynamics of what appears to be a very well-financed organization bringing forward its initiative without, at this point anyway, a counterbalancing a group of power on the other side that's emerging to try to educate voters on reservations that they might have about it.
Glenn?
I'm going to be a little less diplomatic than Paul because we've looked at this very carefully. This is the force of big money trying to win through the confusing the voters. A lawyer will tell you it's easier to confuse a jury than to convince a judge. Well, people who write ballot questions and try to pass it off as something else are trying to end run the legitimate process. This is a group that is funded by extremely wealthy corporate interests, most of which come from the right side. Its spokespersons are either self-aggrandizing, if you've seen them, or ignorant about the issues if you've had a chance to question them. And what this really is part of a national strategy to draw union money and progressive political money away from the Obama campaign and away from other Democrats seeking to attain public office. Now, I say this not as someone who runs an organization, but somebody who observes the political process. It's a national strategy in every state where they are. Stand for Children became a wholly owned subsidiary of big money when they either plotted their master plan or bought it or took over from its earlier mission that had been portrayed to all of us as a really good community organizing group for children. They have effectively disbanded their community organizational stuff. They have eliminated any portrayal of local advocacy. They are holding forums all over the state to which no one goes except their own staff and some people who are there to observe them. So I would say this is manipulative big money at its worst. That said, the agenda, which is anti-union, is attractive to some people. The agenda, which empowers the management side of the table more than the labor side of the table, can be tempting to some people. So school committees and superintendents might say, what's the worst case scenario? We get forced to have a very rigorous, more zealous evaluation system that's more anti-teacher. And some people might like that and might be willing to let Stan do its dirty work. But on sort of a political side, for the sake of democracy, people will need to understand what it is. And that's a right-wing organization funded with big corporate money designed to divert attention and money away from where some progressive money might otherwise go. Again, I say that just as an observer and a commentator, not necessarily biased politically one way or the other. I'd say I'd pass on what I've said as fact. But Paul can't say that because he's representing the legislature and needs to be different.
Glenn and I have worked together for years. I'll tell you, I always admire Glenn's candor. You can always get the 12-gauge shotgun blast from Glenn, on whatever it is. But yeah, I think his analysis is, as usual, on target here, and I think there is to be concerned.
I'd like to thank Glenn for holding back on his statement. And I'd like to move forward and give Louise a chance to say anything she'd care to say before we move a little further on in the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very educational, Paul and Glenn. Sounds like Stand for Children needs to sit down. So I'm going to change the slides a little, and actually the system that is being laid out by the Department of Education for evaluation is certainly sounding as if it is taking into account the research on teacher evaluation, making collaboration, using multiple measures. And so that, despite the complexity, sounds very promising. The complexity concerns me, but it sounds promising. The part I would like to sort of zero in on today for some cautionary notes is the rating of teachers based on the impact of student learning based on standardized test scores. Because although on the surface it sounds logical, truth is rarely simple, and the complexity of looking at those measures, I think we need to be cautious. So I would like to switch to the slideshow that I have here. We're going to start with that. I went and heard the commissioner earlier this week speaking about, Mitchell Chester was present at a curriculum summit that I attended along with my superintendent, Dr. Regina Nash, who's here today. And he talked about NCLB's broken pieces. And he talked about the rising targets requiring that all students reach proficient by 2014. In Massachusetts, proficiency is a much higher bar than most other states. In fact, to reach proficient in 4th grade on our MCAS, a student needs skills equivalent to the 76th percentile nationally. In other words, unless you're the top quartile in skills in 4th grade, you will be needs improvement or below. Many other states have proficient rates at the 20th percentile or 30th percentile. Many of our students who score needs improvement in Massachusetts, if we took that child and beamed them to any other state that same day and had them take that test, would be proficient or even advanced. The average child in Massachusetts does score needs improvement in many grades because average children aren't in the top quartile. So part of the challenge is Massachusetts set very high standards, which I applaud as both an educator and a parent of children who've gone through Massachusetts schools. However, Massachusetts set these high standards before NCLB came on top and said, okay, you've got to get every child there. So my concern about using the growth measures is, although they are well-intentioned and well-researched, what will happen at the federal level on top of these measures that might make us rue the day that we use them for teacher evaluation. So let's go back to Mitchell Chester. He talked about the broken pieces of NCLB because the federal metric is misleading. It's not helpful in identifying schools and districts most in need of intervention. Why is that? Because this bar is high. So let's talk about what that looks like. 2011, the NEAPS, the National Assessment Program that assesses kids in all 50 states, for the 4th year, Massachusetts 4th and 8th graders outscored peers in every other state. We're number 1 in mathematics and in reading. Well, mathematics and reading. 4th consecutive year. Yet, 81% of our schools and 90% of our districts didn't make AYP, adequate yearly progress. Where's the mismatch there? Well, anybody looking at that would say, maybe Massachusetts has higher standards, which we do, and we applaud, until NCLB mandated that every child get there within a certain amount of time.